is our review of the first and second arcs of the Authority. So, yeah, as you guys couldn't tell already from the first part, these guys got some opinions on this arc that everyone may not agree with. So I'm really interested to dig into this. So I think I mentioned previously that this is all of our first times reading the Authority characters. And my first question was going to be, I think we kind of got over this already in the first one. Have you guys even ever read a Wildstorm comic? Has anybody here at all read Wildstorm?
No.
I read the first Stormwatch as it came out. I don't remember it.
And it's the same premise that there's this
No.
group
The Stormwatch is basically so when Wildstorm started, it was Wildcats and Stormwatch were the two books that Brandon Choi and Jim Lee put out, along with eventually Gen 13. Wildstorm, Wildcats, everybody's kind of familiar with them. They got their own Saturday morning cartoon, closer to like the X-Men than the Avengers. And Wildstorm was kind of like the Avengers, Stormwatch was kind of like the Avengers, but it was a government UN superhero team that went in and took care of these different things. I didn't really get into remembering any of that at all. So as far as Wildstorm, I've read Wildcats, the first run of Wildcats. I was all about that. Read some of Stormwatch and some Gen 13, but beyond that, I mean, did not really get into it a lot.
Yeah, I have this very similar experience as you. Like, little kid version of me was collecting Wildcats when I could find it, because the art was great, at least back in the day. Like, that was the art I liked as a kid. Like Jim Lee, are you kidding me? In the 90s, it was great just seeing that. What can I tell you about the story Wildcats? I don't remember a single thing about Wildcats besides, like, I could probably name the characters, like that Spartan and Zealot has somehow become like a mainstay character in DC. She's in Birds of Prey somehow, and other characters like that. And of course, Gen 13, that was a big J. Scott Campbell breakout title. So I remember trying to collect all of those, because with the help of Wizard Magazine and the convention scene, those books were blowing up huge back in the day. And now they're all dollar bin books, of course. So just to hunt down Gen 13 for the J. Scott Campbell art, that was a lot of fun. But once again, story's a little iffy. I remember, a little bit about this. They actually had they were going to make a made-for-TV movie on Fox, kind of like they did the Generation X for Marvel. They were going to do a Gen 13. I think it actually exists on the YouTubes, but I don't think it ever made air on Fox. So I guess an interesting tidbit there about how big it almost really got. And then Stormwatch. I actually collected a little bit of Stormwatch. I remember they did a gimmick at Wildstorm where they had like an issue 21, but then they'd have like issues 18, 19, and 20, and then re-release 21. They did that for like a few of their comics. That was called like
clever. So you kind of got
so you had to buy it twice, maybe. So that's why I'm like, what are they doing? I got to read this to check it out. And I don't, once again, like, it's been so long ago. I just wanted to see what the art looked like, because I didn't know any better at the time. And yeah, they had like writers like Alan Moore on there for a while. And, of course, like I said, Brandon Choi, Jim Lee, they had some good names. But it's just 20 years down the road, no one's really like talking about it or saying, like, oh, you got to read Wildcats number whatever. This one, the story gets really good, or you got to go check out Stormwatch. The only thing they're really the only notoriety it has now, it gave birth to the idea of the Authority. So that's why. Go ahead.
My similar experience is like, I never read these ones, but just all those comics as a kid, like almost across the board during that time period, there's always like so much. Back then as a kid, it's like, oh, there's a lot of like red tape, bureaucracy talk. And it's like, oh, maybe I'm just too young to understand, whatever. I need to be older to understand this. Oh, that's neat and that. When you're older, like, this still doesn't make sense. It still sucks. You go back. It's like, no, this is nonsense. This is like bullshit. I don't want to like read this crap. Like, it's so boring. I don't know. It's funny to see how a lot of comics like during this time period don't really stand up. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Since we're sharing our early 90s experience, I remember art being phenomenal, but maybe even not even getting through an entire book because the story was just, I was so confused and it wasn't good. The stories were never really good, but the art was fantastic. So you kept buying it for the art. But, you know, all the image stories seem to be like, even those early spawns kind of sucked.
Oh yeah.
Where,
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
you know, you're like, what is the story sucks, but the art was fantastic.
Yeah, that's why I bought it was for the art and all, like the violence, all the guns and bullets and stuff. You know, like it was like
And
the
the women,
edginess then
come
back
on!
then.
Chains and
That
pouches,
too.
baby.
Yeah.
Chains,
And the
pouches. That's
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
it's the three things image was
That should
built
be
on.
a shirt. Change pouches. CPC.
Nice.
It's like tables, ladders.
You better not
chairs,
edit
the
that
miles.
Anytime you see me writing with this pen,
It's gonna
He's
be a t-shirt.
editing. He's
You
cut.
made the list. Yeah.
it's the difference between a cut and a t-shirt that's going to reinvent that Comic Core store.
There you go.
But let's get into the Authority
Let's get
Volume
into
1
this
here.
authority.
So the story kind of starts out, and I feel like the point of this first arc was just to introduce you to this list of characters we talked about in our casting. And for me, it really didn't do too much more than that, at least the first 4 issues. I will say this, though. I don't want this to sound completely negative because I do have some positives here. I don't know if you guys do, but I certainly do. I really like the Brian Hitch art. It takes me back to that time where I started recollecting comics in the early 2000s, and one of the first ones I'd picked up was the Ultimates Volume, or not Volume 5, but Ultimates Issue 5, Volume 1, where it was written by Mark Millar, but it was drawn by Brian Hitch. And it was very similar to the art in this, where he does decent character work, but I think his biggest strength is in his city backgrounds. He puts a lot of detail into his backgrounds. It makes it feel very cinematic, in my opinion. That being said, I want to start an art conversation. Drew, I know you have some opinions on the art, so go for it.
I think for its time, it was very different than what a lot of other artists were doing. I think that he really opened things up and made the book look very cinematic. I think that, you know, things like his spaceships and his cityscapes, like you said, are very influential. And he definitely used that moving forward in his own art experience, like on things like the Ultimates. That being said, when you look back at it now, and it's kind of, you know, I say very dismissive to say this, but like it looks very generic. It just is a very generic looking book. And I think that his characters, at least his women, all seem to have the same face. And I just felt like I took some notes here. Let's see what I had to say when I wrote things down. Bland art, stale generic action. When you see like, and it's a lot better in the second arc. I think his action in the second arc is a lot better. But for the most part, you got these clones. If you look closely, they're different character, like they're different people. Like some of them are women, some of them are men, some of them have longer hair.
The same. I thought
They're
the same
not.
face for
They just
these guys.
yes.
Those guys?
They're all
they're all
different.
the
same.
You have to look at them very closely to tell, but it's the same thing with the rest of his characters. You can tell the difference in their costumes, their faces, you cannot. Some of those are women, like you can see their curves and things. Some of the men
I
have
thought they were a
longer
clone
hair.
of the same person. I thought they
Nope.
were all
I
clones.
thought that was all
He
one
just-
clone.
He just only draws one face unless it's
Yeah.
Kaizen Gamora.
Yeah, these faces are, you know, kind of blending into each other, like the same kind of.
Yeah, and like I very much really enjoyed the last Hickman run of Ultimate Invasion, which Hitch drew as well. And I think that it suffers from the exact same thing. It's just kind of like blah. It's like and I agree that a lot of the spaceships and the cityscapes look great, but then like in the second arc when all these spaceships are like flying together and there's supposed to be this dogfight, physically there's no way that ever make possible. Like everything would explode into each other immediately because they're all like headed right for each other. So like you think one frame everything's exploded. So like why would those things be like, it's all crowded. And I think it's nice for him to flex his muscles and put a lot of line work on the page, but it's just, none of it made any damn sense as far as depicting what's actually happening in those dogfights.
You talked about having the same face. Like we want to compare Swift to Hot Girl, but for most of my reading experience, I just saw his Ultimates version of Wasp. Like they almost have the exact same look. like I might do like a side-by-side comparison of the two for the edit, just to prove myself right or wrong, I guess. So I guess let me know what you think if I do that and you see it. But that's all I could think about was, oh, that's the Wasp in this book. But Jason, what did you think about the art?
I think the action scenes were great. I think maybe that's why you hire the guys. Just the dynamics that, like Drew said, the ships, the cities. Some of them had cool like kind of angles and stuff to them. Like Drew said, it's very cinematic at times. Like this was like coming towards you with the spaceships. I like that. There's another the big giant spaceship explosion. There's a lot of really really great panels in this book. So I wouldn't say like the art is bad, but I guess when the details come to faces, you definitely got a point there. And does it seem generic? I wouldn't say generic. There's too much dynamicism to it, but it was still fun. I've read some stinkers in my day. I don't know about you guys, and this, the art wouldn't fall into that category for me.
I'm willing to admit that my take on it feeling generic to me is more about more people doing things the way that Brian Hitch does them now than they did back then. And to me, it feels that way. And at the time, I'm assuming it probably wouldn't have hit me that way at all in 1999.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
But today, looking back on it and reading as many comics as I have, that to me, the style of it just seems like, okay, it's kind of old hat now, when it probably wasn't at the time.
Do you think maybe the coloring kind of adds to that?
I don't know. I think that like maybe me feeling so much that I took that note that the action was generic before I read the second arc. So that first arc to me, it's like, oh, these clones are all coming out of the sky. Well, that's fine. But like you're looking at like 3 pages in a row where it's just them, like 3 of them standing there. And then the next panel is 3 of them standing there. And then the next panel is 3 of them standing there. And then the next panel is 3 of them standing there. And then one panel is something exploding. And then the next panel is 3 of them standing there. It's like if you read through that first invasion or whatever that happens in LA, like literally half the characters are like, well, what are they doing now? And like, how are they fighting this thing? And then all of a sudden everybody turns into feathers or whatever. And it's like, all right, it's whatever. It is what it is. But I feel like there's a lot of kick punchy in a way that doesn't flow as like an action movie would, where it's like his establishing shots are very cinematic. But like, if you watch that fight scene in a movie, you'd be like, well, that guy just punched one guy and that guy just punched one guy, but it's not like a fluid, like choreographed fight that happens from one end of a warehouse to another. Or like I would say the difference is it's like a soap opera fight scene versus a Daredevil hallway fight scene. Like there's not a whole lot of, I don't read you couldn't read the action without the words and know exactly what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you're right. Where, the best parts of them are like kind of like the cities, the landscapes, the ships. It's not like he draws figures bad or anything like that.
I wouldn't say it's I don't think it's bad at all. I mean,
the action itself, the movements and the framing of each one. Yeah, I get you for sure.
I just find it to be extremely average, and I just think it's extremely average compared to the books that I've seen Hitch draw. And compared to when you look at Brian Hitch's art style, like in 1999 in Wildstorm, probably a really new way of doing art. But when you look at the fact that like everybody who drew a Valiant book after that did the exact same thing, it's just kind of samey, if you know what I mean.
Before I turn it over to JB, I do want to say, like, if you're comparing it to like 90s stuff and 2000, like this definitely feels like a book from the mid 2000s to me. So I will give it credit there. Maybe it's just because I read Hitch's stuff around that time, but I do feel like this is slightly before its time, and it was probably like some really eye-popping art for its time. But JB, what did you think of Brian Hitch's work here?
It's the best part of the book. The art is the best part of this book. The story sucks. The characters are all knockoffs of DC characters and Marvel characters. It's a complete ripoff. So, you know, the art is the book, the grandioseness of the story, the you know, the size and scale of what's going on. It's all there in the art, in my opinion, because the story sucks.
So as we transition into the story, I do want to try to play a little devil's advocate here, because I don't know what Jason truly thinks of the story, but I so far I get the point, or get the feeling that Drew and JB are just going to tell how bad the story is. But I'm going to try to pose a scenario here to defend it a little bit. I'm not saying it's perfect. I don't want to defend it that much. But think of The Watchmen, 1985, basically, where they're going to use all these Charlton characters and they're going to make them more gritty and they're going to modernize them. And then they're like, oh no, you can't use those characters, too bad. So then they just got to make like avatars of those characters, basically. And somehow that is like the definitive graphic novel now. So
but he pulled it off.
Yeah, but he pulled it off. I agree.
They didn't pull it off.
I'm just saying the thought process
here
was like, all right, maybe Warren Ellis was trying something similar where he wanted to write, you know, what his modern version of the Justice League would look like, but he didn't have access to those characters because he was working for Wildstorm, who wasn't owned by DC just yet. So this, I think, probably was his version of, you know, you obviously got your Superman, your Batman. You kind of got your Green Lantern in terms of the engineer. It's a character who makes constructs using their mind, what have you. You got Raiden from Mortal Kombat, J. Sparks, I don't know, basically. And then there's just those other weird characters.
You got Hawk Girl and you got Doctor Strange. Come on, man. It's a complete ripoff.
Yeah, Black Lightning.
Yeah, Black Lightning. There you go. So my guess is he probably just looked at the Watchmen and he's just like, oh, okay, so I can take these versions of characters, make them my own, and add my tweaks to them, and then they become my characters. And maybe I'll pull it off, and maybe people just look at them like, okay, that's just a ripoff. But continue to elaborate, JB. What didn't you like about this arc?
It was stupid. The Mandarin character is ridiculous. You know what? I would be more interested in seeing how he killed his two brothers in that story of how they came to power.
Read Wildstorm.
In their area and how he ends up taking out his two brothers. I'd be more interested in that story than him trying to put his stamp on the planet by putting hits on certain parts to put his logo on the planet. It's stupid. The whole cloning thing, I couldn't tell until Drew mentioned it. I thought those were all one dude. They were just clones of one dude that he is mass producing straight. You know, now I see where Star Wars got the idea from, right? I don't know. And then he's throwing them at you. And when it comes to this story, I know everybody, I feel like the old man who is a hater on everything that is new. And I don't want to be the old man who's a hater on everything that's new, okay? The concept of this ship that is in between realities that has access to everywhere, that's cool, man. Expand on that. Tell me more about how that works. You know, where's that going? Where's that been in the past? You know, where did that come from? Not just you're in there and you're kicking back, your feet are up, you're looking out the windows, you're like, man, the view here is great. I don't care if I gave up my life for this. Look at the view. It's stupid. Yeah, I don't know, man. I can't understand some of the characters' power sets. The guy who is one with the cities. What? I don't get it.
It's
you know,
bullshit.
I understand you need to create something new. And again, I'm the old man sitting going, hey, it's not Superman. That's not Batman. You suck. Yeah, I want to see new stuff. I don't think it was developed right. You didn't give me enough of each character. The 4-story arc with the invading Mandarin knockoff barely introduced these characters and didn't give me enough of anything to really go off of. And then to find out the most powerful dude in the whole thing, who's the main Superman knockoff, he's gay. Right at the end, they just kind of throw it out at you that he's gay. And I'm like shocked. I'm shell-shocked. I'm like, wait, what? He's what? No, that didn't happen. And then as I go into issue 5, I don't have another reference to it until the 8th issue where they're like, hey, you know what? let me hit you with another one real quick right at the 8th issue. And I'm like, whoa, he was gay. They never mentioned it for the whole 4 more issues.
Well, this was
I
like
don't know,
1999 and not, 2024 where that's worldly more accepted. So they probably had to be a lot more subtle in terms of building that, character trait for both of them. Would be
Also,
my guess.
this arc, you think the Authority, this is like a new superhero team. It's not. This is basically the continuation of the Stormwatch Black
Stormwatch.
or
Yeah.
Stormwatch
How
Zero
many
or whatever
times
it
is
was.
Stormwatch referenced?
I think it was
first
Stormwatch Black. Yeah.
couple of books. It's like Stormwatch. Oh, this was
Yeah, no,
Stormwatch.
it's
I didn't
direct
agree with Stormwatch.
continuation.
it is a direct continuation of Stormwatch. Stormwatch ended. Brian or Warren Ellis had the reins on Storm. It's basically when New Mutants became X-Force. That's what this is. Stormwatch became the Authority. And like every one of these characters appears first in Stormwatch. Warren Ellis's assumption on this book is that you read Stormwatch. If you haven't read Stormwatch or remember Stormwatch, you're gonna need to kind of be like, wait a second, what's going on here? Every time that he references Stormwatch. And that is a big problem. Apparently the relationship between Apollo and Midnighter has been fleshed out in Stormwatch. The existence of this ship, the carrier ship, has been fleshed out in Stormwatch.
The carrier sits where? In between realities?
Yeah, in the
Yeah, the
bleed.
bleed.
And what they refer
In
to
the
as the
bleed.
And to be honest,
Cool
the bleed
concept.
is
Tell
actually
me more.
well, they do actually. There's a long arc of the Authority where that gets fleshed out as well, and the bleed also gets fleshed out as well in New 52.
Yeah.
And was it Multiversity that's in there a lot as well?
I believe so. Yeah.
So it's actually a concept that Grant Morrison picks up and runs with.
All right, now you're really
in the
confusing
future.
me because you're basically telling me it's part of DC continuity because you
It
see
is.
it in New 52.
It is now.
But
Yep.
these characters, are they all in DC continuity?
They are
These-
now.
They are now?
Yeah.
They weren't then. Yeah. In the New 52.
And they were cool with that, right? They're like, hey, isn't that Superman in a different outfit?
Part of the New 52
So
wasn't
Shazam
just to
once.
update all of the DC universe to be more Marvel-like, which was their like initial thought. Is like let's modernize the DC universe. Let's ground it a little bit. Let's make it a little bit darker, a little bit more alternative. And that worked in a lot of ways and didn't in a lot of other ways. But one of the other big impetuses for resetting the universe was to integrate the Wildstorm universe into the DC universe, to take the imprints, the Vertigo universe that wasn't exactly part of the DC universe was also integrated into the DC universe, taking all of their imprints and making it one continuity was part of what the New 52 was about. So when they did that, everything that was Wildstorm has always been Wildstorm, but now exists within the DC universe. And like a lot of these characters have been expanded upon since then. Some of them were killed off before that even happened. So it's like
of these original 7 that I introduced, who do you think has the best? Well, we already know Engineer's in. Who do you think has the best chance of being
Midnighter.
grabbed?
Oh, for sure.
Midnighter's
Midnighter
in.
Apollo.
Because Midnighter's become like a keystone in the DC universe.
Mhm.
He was a mentor type partner character with Dick Grayson when he was in that Grayson book where he was like an agent of Spiral when the New 52 took away Nightwing.
Even more recently when
he did that Tom King run.
Yeah, when the Superman had like that, when they've kind of introduced to John Kent taking over Superman's role while Superman went away, and then it shows Superman on like War World. They had like a backup Midnighter story running through all of them, and it was really badass and good. Like
Midnighter's awesome.
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah,
Cat
Okay.
Red Figures has a cat named Midnighter.
Yeah.
So of the 7 characters, we know we're getting Engineer. It looks like we're getting Midnighter.
Mhm.
You don't think there's anybody else on this list that is Gunned worthy in
We'll get
phase
Apollo.
1?
Well, we'll get Apollo
Yeah.
because
We'll get
Midnighter
Apollo.
and Apollo kind of are two sides of the same coin.
Deal. Yeah, right.
Well, I feel like
Yeah.
if they're definitely going to do the movie, they have to at least have Ginny Sparks to
You
start
gotta have Sparks.
having
She
the
seems like
team.
she's the leader of the group.
I agree, but when you look at the Authority as it's seen now in DC, like there was a book called Superman and the Authority.
Mhm.
Jenny Sparks isn't in it, and
Okay.
the allegory for Jenny Sparks that they created, that Morrison created, which is pretty much Manchester Black. He is in it, and I think that Manchester Black is. I mean, Jenny Sparks is a good character in this. I think that the second arc really shows a lot of what she can offer a story, just by the basis of
Do you
her
think James Gunn will
existence.
cast his wife as Jenny Sparks if he does?
Honestly, that's not a bad idea.
Right.
She's already got that role. She's she's the Peacemaker's sidekick or whatever.
Sorry,
But I think that I honestly think they might end up going with Manchester Black. So
that'd be cool. I'd love to see Manchester Black. Yeah.
yeah,
All
but Jenny
So
Sparks,
as far
I
as the
think that-
first story arc,
yeah,
I hated
great
it.
character.
The second story arc was better, definitely better.
I wish I would have read the
Horned
second one.
Thanos,
Yeah. I wanted to read
even
that
though
so
there was
bad,
some
man.
craziness, that just to keep his bloodline going in alternate universes, he basically took over China and turned it into a state. It was crazy. This is just
the second arc's really cool in my opinion. Maybe it's just because I read it right after the first arc, but it's really, really hard to follow, just from the way that it's portrayed. But you do get some cool flashback stuff with Jenny Sparks, who is the spirit of the century or whatever, which means that she is 100 years old.
oh no, I read a spoiler on it. Spoiler alert, guys, if you're gonna read this. So as I'm reading the bio for Jenny Sparks, she is the spirit of this century and she dies.
Yeah, there's another
on
one.
December 31st.
There's a new one coming.
Of 90, yeah.
Right.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, I think Ginny Quantum, I believe, gets adopted by Midnighter and Apollo.
Yeah, it's a baby.
Yep.
And there's a really cool part in there with the 1920s like steampunk alternate reality alien ship or whatever, and Jenny Sparks like trying to take it down, and like she looks kind of like a DC Bombshells type style art on it. And that's pretty cool. I really enjoyed all those designs and the alternate reality Great Britain type like jousting spaceships or whatever. They describe it as like she says that there's been alien encounters in the Wildstorm universe, the Damonite War, which is like that's the alien Damonite War or whatever, and that happens that's how most of these characters get killed off before this starts, and that's Warren Ellis wrote Wildcats versus Aliens, which is really all about killing off Stormwatch, and it's terrible. You should read it.
You should read it.
You should.
Next week on Modern Things.
You should read it. It's awful. What is it? One other. It's the people who made was it Hawksmoor or whatever? That's these two alien invasions, but they're covert. In this universe, the alien invasion was overt. They came. They didn't hide that they were coming. And when they got there, they found that the personalities of the Italians during the Renaissance matched their vibe. And they're like, yeah, we'll mate with you. And then they ended up being the dominant species on the planet.
Which is funny. Like, I only read the beginning of this first issue, the 1 of 4. And you see there's just one like regular skin colored guy in charge of, and this blue blood guy's kind of following his say and following him throughout this palace.
Yeah.
And this guy like immediately insults him in the blue blood, even though they're superior, apparently, and then of course like his boss is a blue blood and this annihilates him. But I'm like, what are you thinking? Like what was your thought behind this? Of why even say that? Like if they're so much stronger than you, like to me, right away, I'm like, okay, here's another like crappy start to another crappy story. But then that's as far as I got. But it still looks cooler than what happened previously. So
no, the second arc was way better than the first arc. Carson, did you read all 3 arcs?
I didn't get a chance to read 9 through 12. I was going to, but I think we kind of all agreed to at least stop.
The art looks awesome. It's all like space, like sci-fi ships and stuff. Like it looks really cool.
I really I think it was night and day comparison between the first and second arcs. The first arc just kind of served to like, let's introduce our characters and give them something to hit. Is pretty much the first 4 issues.
Show their power set. Yeah.
Yes. So, and then the second,
no matter how little they make sense.
And then the second half of what we read, at least like shows the ability of like what the story's capable of. They can use this machine they're in to traverse dimensions and universes. And not only that, they elaborate on the character of Jenny Sparks, who I believe we only get for the 12 total issues, but I think she's from a different alternate reality. And then she kind of gets trapped into that one with the blue aliens, and then somehow she ends up in the Wildstorm universe. So like she's lived for 100 years, she's a dimension hopper, and she already knows everything that's going on. So as soon as they get invaded by an alternate dimension to start off the arc, and you're just like, oh, that does open up storylines quite a bit. And by the end of it, you kind of understand why they actually have the name of the Authority, is because they don't like to just react to something. They like to make sure, like, they like to be proactive. They're going to go attack it and make sure it doesn't happen again. They're going to get to the point where they're just like, okay, this person could attack. We're going to hit them harder, and we're going to hit them first. So that's when it gets real interesting to me.
I got the impression that she was actually from our reality, the Wildstorm universe, because the British Space Force or whatever they were talking about, she was part of them because the initial bleed over of those sliding Albions, I guess they call them, they came in the 1920s, and
that was her cover, though. Wasn't that just a cover for her?
The cover was the space force or whatever, because they were actually dealing with the issue of these people crossing over. And like the initial thought process was that there would be peace and they would, share technology. And then it just kind of went sideways because of the world wars that kept happening in that other universe. That other universe kept becoming more violent and more toxic, and something that we didn't want to deal with.
So I'm confused as to what ended up happening there. She said in the 20s, and I just tell me if I'm right here. There was a world war in the other universe where they used biological weapons, but they vented those biological weapons.
In the 50s, they vented the biological weapons.
Or something.
They vented
through
those
the door or rift or whatever
into our current reality.
Yes.
Just because they didn't like that universe. So like, oh, here's some like poisonous gas that's going to kill us. Let's kill this other realm we don't like.
Fuck the other people too. They're like, hey, we're going to die, so fuck you too.
Yeah, when they introduced the ship that goes through the bleed of like, when they introduced the ship that goes to the bleed of like, you can go anywhere, anytime, anything. I was like, oh, you have some great ideas for stories that could just be like, oh, Legends of Tomorrow TV show, and just do whatever you want and change things. So I kind of expected to see some fun shenanigans in the future. I'm not sure how the rest of the stories are, but could be cool. Good potential.
Is Carson, did you read Multiversity?
I did not. I was kind of getting out of the.
Is the carrier the same? Is the carrier the same ship?
I think it is.
I would say it probably should.
Like with Captain Carrot and whoever that
the Zoo Crew.
Which Black Superman was president?
The president, yeah, the one that looks like Obama. Yeah,
Cal Zod
and Captain Carrot and all those characters and Multiversity.
Yeah, Calvin Ellis. Yeah.
They, I believe,
I have the Absolute Edition,
they used
but
the
I haven't read
carrier
it.
in that.
Where the fuck did the carrier come from?
It's a slip ship. It's just like these other ships that the Albions are using.
It's like Event Horizon.
Yeah, it's like I think it's one of those things that they learn more about it throughout time, but it's not something I really know about. So it's like I think you're not supposed to know what's going on with the carrier. They have a lot of questions about it themselves, and it's they can kind of steer it, but it's conscious and sentient.
Yeah, it knows where it's going at all times.
It knows where it's
going. I got a hit. I think in the other part I mentioned Doctor Who. I got a heavy TARDIS vibe out of this carrier, just because like the TARDIS is also technically kind of supposed to be sentient and takes the Doctor where the Doctor needs to go for the most part. He's kind of flicks switches and runs around like a crazy person. And yeah, like the TARDIS actually has its own conscience too. Whereas like in this one, the engineer kind of has to like, take us there, carrier. And then like, there's one part, probably the part of the whole part we read is where Midnighter, to take down Gamora Island or whatever, he's just like, hey, carrier, I want to crash into that Gamora building and kill all those clones.
punch that island, spaceship.
Yeah, he's like, just go punch that
To
island.
bust through their shield,
like,
he takes the ship and busts through their shield with it. Okay.
And through their corporate headquarters, and he's like, I just wanted to have some fun. He smashed to the window. So good.
So that was a really good part. That's probably my favorite part of all.
So hold on, let's talk real quick. We got this the Doctor, right? You've got in the first arc, he turns these clones coming out of the sky to feathers. And then in the second arc, isn't that kind of a little I don't know.
He turns them into like shards of glass,
genocidal, where he takes the water level and raises it.
Oh, that's just crazy, dude.
No, what he says he does there is that he holds the land masses and spins the fucking planet around.
Actually, what happens is he leaves everybody and everything in its place while the Earth spins. So while the Earth spins, it takes its atmosphere with it. So when they sit there, they all die in the vacuum of space.
Yep, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's asinine. Not only is it crazy,
it's huge genocide with their wizard. It ain't nobody tripping. They're like, oh, by the way, we're the authority.
Hey everybody, we're the authority. Fuck you. You guys fucked up, and we're not messing with you no more. So fuck you. You're dead.
That's pretty much the impetus of this team, though. Is like the idea is Ellis wants everybody to be OP and have too much power and stretch those muscles and show you kind of this is pre the boys. This is pre was it Supreme Power? This is basically Warren Ellis saying, what if the Justice League thought they knew better and didn't really care about humanity? They just cared about the big picture, and they did what was best for the big picture in their minds, regardless of what the collateral damage was, regardless of what the consequences were to anybody else. And in that mode, I kind of enjoy what this story does. I just think that since it's been done better. And what they've done before, as far as Watchmen and taking known characters and giving them a different spin, was done better before. And I think that doesn't make this stand out. But it kind of was a precursor to a lot of those, stories where it's like, well, what if Superman was an asshole?
I think that kind of originated
that's the only point that James Gunn wants, that there is something up there that is making decisions at that level and F everybody else, that Superman answers to the authority.
Well, Superman won't ever answer the authority. They end up answering to him. And just
the
last and basically Morrison took this idea and created the Elite which was Manchester Black and all those characters that fought against Superman, and they found out quickly as well that Superman will not bow to their authority either. Kal-El stands as a paragon of virtue regardless of what happens, which makes him an incredible and also extremely boring character at times.
Yeah, this I agree, it's like ahead of its time, but there was also a precursor to this in 1990. There's a comic called The Brat Pack, made by the guy named Rick Veitch, and that stuff was like, you can tell that I feel like that's kind of where the boys got major inspiration from. But it was like really graphic, and it dealt with like S&M and sexual stuff, but it's like with like superheroes, and so I don't know. I would always want to, give a shout out to like precursor early stuff that happened before everyone just thinks, oh, this is where it came from. Like, no, there's more stuff that came before this. So.
Yeah, for sure. There's these ideas are are a lot of times cannibalized and recycled. And I think that this, you're right. This is ahead of its time, but I also feel that it's kind of like a side of its time as well. I think that this not being Marvel or DC puts it in like a weird area, and the fact that it's not really Image either. It's it's its own little universe. It kind of feels like when I read The Authority, it doesn't feel like Wildstorm as much to me as it feels like Valiant.
Okay. I can
You
see
know
that.
what? The character, the engineer, reminds me of everything 90s Image. That particular character that can turn herself into anything and shoot anything at any time. And that just reminds me of 90s Image Valiant type of character.
So on that note, if she can turn herself into anything, let me ask you why she's always got her shiny ass hanging out.
Why?
Like that, she's like liquid metal, and she's got
Good for
like
the art.
apparent nipples.
She does
in every
change into
panel.
a human form later on. There's like 1 or 2 panels.
That's
that
why
have
we
her,
read
right?
it as
She got
kids,
out of the
man.
shower and she had like a human skin looking thing at
Yeah.
one point. Yeah. So I don't know. That is very strange. I guess maybe the armor gives her like it's like armor, like metal as reflective instead of being skin sometimes. But that character
Hitch just wanted to draw.
Yeah.
well, the character reminded me of like the Iron Man character Jocasta, who's like an all metal kind of woman.
Yeah.
Or
So
I liken her design a lot. Basically, it seems like they kind of aped that design when they made the Danger Room an actual character, because Danger looks a lot like the Engineer.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I guess that all came also from like what the 1920s Metropolis, the black and white movie, like that all woman robot kind of looking. So I mean, I don't know.
All right, so since we kind of talked about this for long enough, I guess reading some of the spoilers upcoming, I am kind of compelled by this book just because I feel like, especially after reading the second volume, I don't know what kind of crazy direction these characters will take things in next, and they're all godlike beings. So I feel kind of compelled to keep reading a little bit just to see, because
I'm gonna finish to 12 because I own it.
Yeah,
since
I'd
I
like
bought
to.
the first arc and I own through 12. I'm gonna read through 12.
Because Mark Millar and Frank Quitely take up the reins once the first arc is done, and I like both of them as well. So I'm curious to see what they come up with because it sounds insane.
There's an Abnett and Lanning arc. There's an arc with art by Dustin Nguyen.
I saw that. I saw Dustin Nguyen was on there, and then because it sounds like it was kind of also plagued with delays. And then once DC picked up Wildstorm, there was some more censorship that Mark Millar obviously didn't care for. But like Jason, would you consider reading any more Authority after this?
I mean, I'd like to finish this volume 1 and see where it goes, because the sci-fi stuff looks amazing. Like all these spaceships, and you have that Jocasta knockoff character with like wires and stuff coming at her. It just looks cool, man. I like sci-fi stuff, so I mean, I'd have to judge after that if I would want to or not.
Sure.
But based on the first story, nah, I didn't really want to. The second one, it seems like okay. You guys liked it a lot better. I'd give it a chance to see this evil alien Thanos and stuff.
That's why I read it, because Drew.
But then again, it changes with the writer too, right? So it's like, but you have these basis of knowledge of these characters and what they can and can't do. There's potential there to do something cool with them, I think. But I mean, that's just depends on the writer, And I guess with any character, it just depends on the writer. And once again, if it wasn't for this art, like, dude, that was so painful for that first issue, man. I just God, painful. Maybe it was because there were so many characters. He's just like, okay, I just got to give like a glimpse, just a top surface
because every word that came out of Gamora's mouth was stupid.
Drew, would you keep reading this, or are you gonna check out the Millar stuff at all?
I really have no interest to keep digging into the Wildstorm universe. If we want to go back and read the first arc of Wildcats at some point, that's about as far as I'm really willing to dig in. I think that I might start buying some Stormwatch books, because every one of these characters that might end up in this movie has a first appearance that is probably a quarter at your local comic book shop. Like 25 fucking cents for a first appearance of the Engineer. And if it ends up being something, it ends up being something. If not. But like,
you know what would be cool? Carson, I don't know if it's too much work, but if you could put up some photos at the end of our video of the first appearance of some of these characters.
Oh, okay.
Give us some visual to what to look for in the dollar bin or quarter cent, because that's where they're at. That's
All
where
right.
all these books are at.
Sorry. I would read
Okay.
some like grifter stuff, and I kind of dug what Matthew Rosenberg did with some issues in the past, somewhat recently in the last year or two, and I'd like to read. I guess he even brought it back again after he was kind of dabbling in it. I didn't read that series, his solo stuff, but there's some fun characters out there, man, and I'm excited they're being kind of more in the DC universe, and yeah, you never know when they catch on, because then they'll maybe be a hit character with a better writer behind them. So. Yeah.
Right. Maybe in the within the next
10
2
years.
years, we show up to a con and every kid is dressed like Jack Hawksmoor, the footless three-piece suit wearing, I commune with the city dumb fuck. And maybe he's the new Deadpool. You don't know.
It's like, kid, you gotta wear shoes to come into this con. I'm sorry. But JB, I think it's time to give our CGC CBCS style scoring here.
Boy.
So what are your final thoughts and what's your score on this thing?
First, I do have to say that from the first arc to the second arc, it went from bad to okay, and maybe the third arc got better. But based on just those first two arcs, story, art, everything, it's not even VF, man. It's got to be like 6.5. It's not even VF. It's
Lots
not
of
even
spine
very fun.
ticks.
It's
All
6.5.
right. You gotta put that thing in the press. Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I gotta get something similar. I'm too nice with my rankings. I'd be like, oh yeah, 8.5, but not definitely not that. That's way too high. Now you're right. That puts it into perspective.
It's fine.
It's full of spine ticks, man. It's like the comic you got as a kid, and you always kept, throughout time. You look at it now, it's just like all just creased everywhere. There's a staple missing. But it's fun to look at. There's some nice art in there still. It has some good memories, maybe for it at the time when it came out. So yeah, I'd maybe be a nice 6.0, 6.5. That's pretty good, JB.
Yeah.
Drew?
Well, I took some notes here. Let's read them off real quick. Bland art, stale generic action. I think I'm a little bit harsh on the art.
Harsh on the art.
I think that
is it a no grade, an NG, just no cover?
No, I just think that, like, my personal opinion, I think that me saying that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's not. It's not bad. It's serviceable. You can read this book. It's not Mr. Simmons from Department of Truth where my eyes hurt at the end.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's not that bad. Little as far as the stories were nonsense. They were hard to get your head around. But there are some cool characters. Jenny Sparks is cool. Midnighter's clearly a badass, and the Doctor is a really interesting character. Beyond that, I wrote, what the fuck are Hawksmoor's powers anyway, and why is Swift even in this book? They just have no purpose. I mean, Hawksmoor has a purpose. He does really big, amazing things that make zero sense whatsoever.
So overpowered.
Bird Lady does nothing at all. And with that said, this book is like a 7. I'll give it a 7.0. I think that there are some interesting concepts that aren't really fully realized because Warren Ellis insists upon you knowing what the hell's going on before you get into it. And there's really no way for you to garner enough explanation without doing extra digging, which I did just because I was so confused and was just like, I'm not a stupid person. I read comics all the time. Why doesn't this make sense? And the answer is because they just don't explain it. And there's a lot of cool concepts though. And I think that they could be great in the right hands. And there is definitely potential with this type of storytelling. Is it seen here? Absolutely not. Is there a big giant eunuch Thanos with devil horns or ram horns on the side of his head
Thanos
who just explodes because some guy knows about cities? Like, I guess that happens. That's what happened. If you want to know what happened, some guy who communes with cities made another dude explode. How does that work? Comics.
Overpowered. They're all overpowered.
Yeah, this is like a 7-0. There's definitely potential here. There are bones to this story. There's just really not enough meat on them for it to be a classic the way we want it.
Carson, is that the first time that Jason and I have had scores lower?
Then Drew.
Probably. I think these are the lowest scores we've had on the show ever.
Wow.
I've got some much lower scores.
Well, you do first. I
Much
think on
lower.
average, I think this is our lowest average score going. I'm
We
gonna
have to go back and look at Tornado's Path and see what happened.
Ooh, that's
Hey,
true.
here's
the
crisis.
No, I think I at least got that
Reaver?
lopside. I think I gave it like a 9.4 or something like that. You guys are like, what?
Here's
But
the
anyway,
crisis.
On this one, I think I'm gonna at least have to go 8.0 just out of fear that
Ooh.
our Comic Core friend Catrun Figures is gonna come attack all of us if I don't give it
Oh,
at least an
shit.
8. I'll give it an 8.0 cracked slab. I dropped it on accident.
Crack
So I'll go cracked slab.
Uh,
I did enjoy it for the most part, though. Like I said, I had my qualms with the first story arc just because it was an introductory arc that lasted 4 full issues.
It
I've
sucked.
kind of accepted, just as we were talking about it, that's just comics, though. Like all the Stormwatch stuff, like the only people who were probably going to buy this book in 1999 were the fans of Stormwatch and the people who read the Warren Ellis Stormwatch stuff. So that being said, going from that book into this, a lot of the stuff is probably understood, whereas this book kind of grew bigger than Stormwatch, obviously. So a lot of the explanation that should have been there is just lost in time because, hey, sometimes that's just the way comic books work. The second arc saved my score, honestly, just because it showed what the Authority is capable of with the dimension travel. Jenny Sparks, just in general, she became a much better character in the second arc for me, just showing that, she was almost 100 years old and she had all this time they could explore. I actually ended up reading the Planetary crossover. By the way, it wasn't that great. You don't have to go read it. Just if you kind of enjoyed this read, you're watching out there, you might check it out if you like Planetary as well. It does have some really good Phil Jimenez art in it, which I was surprised to see he did the art for it. But yeah, it was kind of interesting just because you get to see Jenny Sparks and Elijah Snow, the main protagonist in Planetary. They have a little interaction there, and it was kind of fun. But yeah, the second arc definitely saved it. I like the idea of the bleed. It was so good that, they stole it when they did the DC stuff. It was in New 52 a lot. I believe that's where Captain Atom hid and had to fight the Wildstorm universe once or something like that. So I like a lot of the ideas they introduced. Midnighter, obviously, he's going to steal the show. He stole the show for me. He was the best character in the first arc by miles. Still fun in the second arc. I can't wait to see more of that. That's why I asked you guys if you want to read more, because I definitely at least want to finish this arc. I want to start the second arc with Mark Millar and Frank Quitely because I like those guys. So I definitely want to see where they're going to go from there, because from what I've read, it's just kind of hard to know where they're going next, because it's just they're not afraid to take risks with these characters. So I think it could pay off long term. Will I read all of it? Probably not, but I want to read some more. All right, so that was our review of The Authority. Let us know what you guys think down below, because I know there's some big Authority fans out there that love this book. Maybe it's just we didn't read the right story arc yet, or it just gets a lot better. I'm curious to see when it gets better.
If you're an Authority fan and you know where we need to read to,
Yes.
put it in the comments. If you're like,
please
read to issue number X before you make a judgment, put it in the comments.
Absolutely, because Catrun Figures, our friend from the Comic Core, if you don't know her, she was telling me about the story. I don't know when it is and where it takes place, but apparently Apollo gets put in hell somehow, and Midnighter has to fight his way through hell to save Apollo. I do want to see that story. Just Midnighter fighting the demons of hell. Sounds awesome.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Let me know what that story arc is, because I want to read it. But JB, where can people find you?
You can find me right over here in Instagram at DiscoveryBayComics. I also have a YouTube channel on Thursday nights. I am on the Lords of the Long Box doing the Shakers list. I'm one of the talking heads on that show. Good time. And once a week, day undisclosed, I do sell on that platform that is hated. But hey, someone's got to do it.
Make that money, boy.
You do have a really good show on that platform that is hated. I
Thank
do
you.
enjoy it, and I bought a couple books off of there. So
Appreciate you.
you want to see an awesome salesman? Check out JB's auction. It's awesome. But Jason, where can people find you?
You can find me on the podcast called The Suck, SUCC. The bunch of other meme people make memes, and you can join our Discord. You can hear us on Spotify. You can join the Patreon and get bonus episodes every week behind the paywall. But yeah, it's a fun current events joke kind of stuff. Check it out. As far as comic stuff, finally getting back in here with the Modern Men, so you'll find me here.
What about you, Drew?
Yeah, don't look for me. You ain't gonna find it. What are you looking for anyway? What are you looking for? You ain't gonna find it here.
I'm looking for what we're gonna read next, and if we have a choice of Marvel stuff, that's in the
Yeah, it's got to be Marvel.
zeitgeist.
We're reading something Marvel next,
And if we
guys.
have a choice between either X-Men or Fantastic Four, I would rather preferably read X-Men than Fantastic Four.
Okay.
But that I'm not.
Well, you know, it
against either,
depends
so.
on the run. Maybe we'll have to sit down and read all 38,000 issues of Jonathan Hickman's run on Fantastic Four. That would be great for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's
Future
a good point.
Foundation.
I
that
like
would be
Hickman.
cool.
I like Hickman. So
That's true.
Carson,
You would love it.
Carson, where can people find you? I'm sorry.
They can find me, Seawoodard19 on YouTube. I'm trying to get back into the thick of the thing, starting with my original Tuesday night live stream. Usually I try to go Tuesdays live at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm also on Instagram under the same handle, Seawoodard19, on X/Twitter, whatever you feel like calling it nowadays. If you search Seawoodard19 on most engines, I'm probably on there. Xbox, PlayStation, all that fun stuff. Big thank you if you're checking out this episode. Don't forget to check out episode 1 as well. The playlist over on the Comic Core side probably be in the link down below. Big thank you guys. JB, do you remember your sign out? Sign us out this week.
Don't forget, we had a good time.